In this episode of Ottawa Business Journal's Behind the Headlines, a planned redevelopment of a historic ByWard Market building, Ottawa Tourism's plans for bringing visitors back to the capital, and a popular craft distillery catches the eyes of investors. All this and more coming up right now. Behind the Headlines is brought to you by Nelligan Law. Their profession is the law, their product is peace of mind. Hello and welcome to Behind the Headlines for the week of June 7th, 2021. I'm Michael Kern from the Ottawa Business Journal. Behind the Headlines is our regular podcast from OBJ to explore the most popular local business stories. I'm happy to be joined by my two colleagues with us here again today, Peter Kavesi and David Sally. Welcome to both of you. Listen, Dave, we're going to start off with a story about a historic commercial building on York Street that's in the ByWard Market that is poised for, let's call it, a major facelift. It's a 5-story heritage building, and it's fairly well known because Shopify was there at one point, and it's currently the home of Cavuto and architecture firm, Leinbach. By the way, OBJ was there if you go way back in our history too. But anyway, the point is a Montreal developer wants to build a 22-story hotel apartment complex on the site, but preserve, that's the key point, the heritage aspect. And the proponent behind the project is a company called RIMAP. I hope I got that pronunciation right, which has a growing portfolio in Ottawa. Dave, you spoke with RIMAP's executive. What's the company's plans for the National Capital Region?
Well, yeah, Mike, as you say, this is a big one, obviously. They're really making a splash with this proposal to redevelop the major building. It's over a century old, built in 1913. They want to build a hotel there with 214 suites and then put the apartment building beside it. It's a very well-known property, but it is by no means the only property that RIMAP has a stake in the capital. It hasn't been here long, but it's making a splash. So as you said, I did talk recently to the co-president of RIMAP, Mark Ferrati, and he says he's really bullish on Ottawa. His wife's family is from here. She grew up in Orleans, so he knows the area well. And he says Ottawa's fantastic. People often underrate it. So in addition to the ByWard Market project they're actually involved in another project also in the market area. Because their sister company is a hotel management firm. So RIMAP is building a 208-room AC Hotels by Marriott property nearby at 201 Rideau Street. It's building that in partnership with its other sister company, Prince Developments. So that's one thing it's got on the go. It's not the only thing, though. It's also into the rental scene here in the capital. It's got a 19-story apartment high-rise at the corner of Bronson Avenue and Gloucester Street called the Beckett. It's building that. That's a 250-unit building that's going to be opening this summer. So it partnered with Prince on that development as well. And that building is going to be managed by District Realty. And besides that, it also owns RIMAP and Prince, actually, in combination. The two of them own a 2/3 stake in another property not far from the market at the corner of Rideau Street and King Edward Avenue. People would know that because there's a big LCBO on that site. So the LCBO still has several years left on a long-term lease there. So Verratti said it'll probably be closer to the end of the decade before they know what they're going to do with that property. But he said it's more likely to be a multi-residential project than a hotel or something along that line. So and that's not it. He told me he's promising more big news soon for the Ottawa area. So RIMAP is really moving into the capital region in a big way, and it's going to be exciting to see what else they have planned.
That's a lot of activity. And by the way, if people are having trouble picturing this, it's just a little bit east of Andaz, which of course was the another big hotel project that really I think changed the complexion of the ByWard Market. Peter, let's get your take on this. What stands out in your mind about this project?
Two things. I guess the first one is, it is exciting to see the adaptive reuse of a building of this vintage commercial building. We often talk here in Ottawa, we don't have the same industrial heritage that cities like Toronto and Montreal, just to name our two neighbors, have. So, I remember when, it was a few years ago when I was looking at some of the documents surrounding the Fed's Booth Street project redevelopment, and how so many people are saying, well, no, it's so important to preserve these brick smokestacks just because Ottawa doesn't have a lot of these. So it is exciting to see this century-old, warehouse finding new life in new uses. So that's pretty cool. But the one thing that did as well sort of jump out to me, one of the first things we said about this building, that's the former home of Shopify. And as Shopify was scaling up, they went to a few different locations in the ByWard Market. I remember OBJ even had on its cover, right, is the ByWard Market stealing Canada's spotlight for tech firms. So we are poised to lose some office space in the ByWard Market. Funny, Mike, you mentioned the Andaz Hotel. Well, a decade ago, that was also an office building, the Union de Canada building. That was the home of Travel Pod, which was an exciting company in Ottawa's .com era. So certainly, again, neighborhoods are always going to be changing. They are evolving, but you do wonder though that with the loss of these buildings, which have been the home of some pretty cool Ottawa tech companies over the years, if there might be some long-term implications for the makeup of the ByWard Market community, its commercial, the makeup of its commercial tenants overall in the long term.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You're right. I think everyone agrees the ByWard Market needs a better mix. What they're usually meaning is fewer bars and more retail, but part of that mix probably should be commercial buildings too. So there's not only the residential component, but people working there. That it'll be very interesting. Of course, the city is investing all sorts of money in the ByWard Market. It will continue to be a hot spot both for local residents and tourists. And that's a good transition to our second story, which, Dave, we're going to talk to you about. The story is really about Ottawa Tourism preparing for 2022 and beyond. In fact, in the last mayor's breakfast, we had organized by OBJ and the Board of Trade, we had Michael Crockett, the presidency of Ottawa Tourism, come on, talking about Ottawa's bilingual character, talking about the rural and urban landscapes in a bid to attract visitors. But he also said, Dave, that individual residents and businesses, we have a role to play in making sure Ottawa is on the radar of travelers. You were listening into that, Dave. What stands out for you?
Well, Mike, as you say, Michael Crockett, he is a big time advocate, obviously, for tourism here in the capital. That's his job after all, and he wants to see it thrive again. So yeah, he had a message last week when they during a virtual Q&A with the head of the Ottawa Board of Trade, Su-Ling Ching. He was a man with a bit of an agenda. He said, it's going to be up to all of us here in the city to try and sell sell the capital, so to speak, to our neighbors in Toronto, Montreal, Kingston, surrounding cities. Get them to come down, encourage people to start coming for road trips, and be not only that, an ambassador to other things. If you work for a company, encourage the head office to bring their convention here once everybody's comfortable with traveling again, and those sports teams, get those national big hockey tournaments and other national sports championships, for example. Encouraging them to consider Ottawa as the host city. All those things are ways he feels that are going to, hopefully accelerate the Ottawa's the rebound of the tourism economy, which has obviously taken a big hit during the pandemic. Ottawa Tourism has done studies. They think it could cost up to $2.6 billion in lost visitor spending, the effects of the pandemic, by the end of this year. For a sector that employs more than 40,000 people, in quote unquote normal times, that's a huge hit. And so Ottawa Tourism is trying to do other things as well. Earlier last week, they announced they're launching this new initiative called the Bookmark Ottawa campaign, where basically, they're targeting travelers within driving distance, and they're basically asking them to go to the Ottawa Tourism website, choose from a variety of activities and destinations that they would like to do if they could have their dream trip to the capital region. Things like whitewater rafting, maybe on the Ottawa River, touring some craft breweries, or hopefully getting a ride on the new zip line that's going to be running between the two sides of the Zibi development on the Ottawa River. So you can pick those things, you can submit your picks, and everybody who does that gets entered into a draw for a trip for two to Ottawa that covers basically transportation, 2 nights at a local hotel of their choice, and some gift cards as well. So Ottawa Tourism is trying to do things like that to kind of kickstart, hopefully get some momentum going, getting people thinking about, once they are ready to hop in their cars, go somewhere again, that hopefully they think that Ottawa is top of mind, and that can also get some spending in addition to us kind of being tourists in our own backyard, if you will.
Good. I might enter the draw, Dave. Who knows? I'd like to go on a nice home vacation. Anyway, Peter and Dave, before we explore the last story of the day, I want to bring in our legal expert from Nelligan Law, Brian Thaw, a lawyer in the real estate and development practice. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
Brian, we have talked a lot at OBJ, both on this podcast, our website, publications, social media. We're obsessed with this hot residential real estate market. We really have seen nothing like it in recent times. At OBJ, we've been very focused on, that kind of average prices going up and up and up, and affordability issues. But there's another aspect of this, Brian, that I wanted your feedback in. So there's such a limited inventory of homes, it's becoming more commonplace for buyers to make unconditional offers. And Brian, that means unnecessary risks for buyers. Explain why.
Yeah, so typically, and especially about a year ago before COVID, when the market was still at its regular norm, we would see most buyers would go into an agreement of purchase and sale with conditions, and these conditions would be put in place for their protection. So it gives them an opportunity before they have to formally commit to close on the transaction to check with their bank to make sure they have financing in place, do an inspection of the property to see if there's anything unusual about the property that should be taken into consideration, or in the case of a condominium, reviewing the condominium's documents to make sure there's nothing unusual about the condominium unit itself or the condominium corporation. So I think we're starting to see buyers now removing those conditions and going in firm into agreements. And the risk is you're pretty much going in blind.
So, Brian, in some cases, as we said, there's limited inventory, and they might feel that it's almost necessary to waive those conditions. But certainly, there must be something they can do from a legal perspective that would protect them a little bit in this situation.
Yeah, you hit the hammer on the nail, Michael. I always tell my clients, if they know they're going to be putting in an offer without conditions, call me first. That way, we can have a discussion about what items we can look into together and deal with before you put in an offer. So if you wanted to buy a condominium unit, let's see if we can review the condominium documents before you put your offer in. And I think you have to, because now you're doing bully offers and shotgun offers, and you only have one shot to put your offer in, but at least you've had an opportunity beforehand to have your lawyer review documentation with you.
That makes a heck of a lot of sense. So you might have to live with an unconditional offer, but it doesn't mean you have to sit back. You can be proactive, call a great legal expert like you, Brian, and get some advice before that offer goes in.
Exactly.
Well, listen, Brian, once again, thank you very much for joining us and sharing all your expertise on Behind the Headlines. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
That was Brian Thaw from Nelligan, one of the sponsors of Behind the Headlines. Thanks to them for their support. It's time for the third and final story. Peter, I think we're going to go to you on this one. It's a story about a favorite distillery in the way far West End. And the distillery is called Dairy Distillery. It's located in Elmont. The interesting thing is they create vodka from a milk permeate. And the company took a second spot on OBJ's list of fastest growing companies. Dave, you were in charge of that with revenue growth, believe it or not, of 2,000% in its first 3 years, which is pretty crazy. So not only do they have that revenue growth, Peter, but now they have $4.8 million investment from a private equity firm. What do you think attracted the investor?
So there were some basic business fundamentals that aren't too surprising. So it's a company that already has very quickly established a solid track record, a strong revenue base, and a really efficient production process. But the lead investor behind the deal, which is Ag Capital Canada, also noted that Dairy Distillery's business model aligns with this theme of environmental sustainability that's becoming really quickly much more popular with investors all around the world. So again, Dairy Distillery is effectively taking an unused byproduct from dairy processing plants and turning it into useful consumer products. That's a pretty awesome reuse. And as well, the investors were also really impressed with how the company managed to pivot during the pandemic to quickly produce hand sanitizer and diversify its product offerings. With this investment, we might see even more diversification of its product base. Dairy Distillery says that it's going to be able to construct a new large-scale ethanol plant capable of producing up to 8 million liters a year of a low-carbon fuel. So even more diversification is on the horizon.
Quite the entrepreneurs. Wow. Cheers to them. So listen, Dave, we're going to go to Peter. Thank you very much for your contributions. Peter, going to wrap up with you. We just went to press a few days ago with our summer news magazine. Tell us what's inside.
So our columnist to lead off the news magazine did a spectacular job uncovering some really, really cool stories. So just very, very briefly, Ron Corbett took a walk down Montreal Road, which is undergoing a multi-year revitalization project. Again, we all know that road work can be very disruptive for businesses, but Ron really explored this issue in great depth and tackled some questions about what are the obligations of this city to help businesses through this period. Should they be compensated? How should the city be working with the business community? And of course, in typical Ron Corbett style, he met all sorts of fascinating entrepreneurs in that particular Vanier neighborhood. Also, just briefly, Caroline Phillips had a really neat conversation with Ian Sherman, who's preparing for the next stage of his career as he readies to leave EY. And Robert Hawking shares a story of a former CGOH executive's life after television. So those are some of my favorite features. But our cover story, of course, is the profiles of our 40 under 40 recipients. So these are 40 young business leaders selected for their business accomplishments, professional experiences, and community involvement. We take a look at some of their backstories about some of the lessons that they've learned, their biggest achievements, the challenges they've overcome. And every year, Mike, these stories just never fail to impress and inspire me. Of course, the news magazine is only one part of these awards. Mike, I know you're really hard at work preparing for one of our big flagship events coming up this month.
We are, and in fact, we're videotaping today. We're videotaping all next week. We're doing video profiles of all the 40 under 40, and all of this is a lead up to a June 23rd broadcast on YouTube Live in conjunction with Rogers as well. And we have a great show lined up. There'll be lots of profiles, of course, of the recipients. We'll have some interesting bio tidbits. We've got a special musical guest, celebrity, congratulations. So there's lots coming up on June 23rd, and we'll be sure to share more information on OBJ channels. Thanks for everything you did, and thanks for all the hard work on the issue, Peter. Good job. That brings us to the end of this episode. A reminder, this podcast can be watched on YouTube, obviously, and listened to on popular podcast channels like Apple and Google. If you're doing the video thing, make sure on YouTube, of course, make sure to like, subscribe, click the bell. That means you get a notification when we post a new video. I really encourage you to go to obj.ca. Of course, that website is our long-standing website for 20-something years now, but we update it on weekdays throughout the day. So watch that for constant content, And if you never want to miss a headline, then the big recommendation is to go to obj.ca/newsletter/sign up. And subscribe to OBJ Today. So that's our weekday, Monday to Friday email newsletter. And it's a full summary of all the news of the day. On behalf of my colleagues, Peter and David, thanks for tuning in. Please stay safe and healthy. I hope to see you soon.